Hi, I'm John. Welcome to the show today. On today's show, I am going to rank the 9 studio albums by the legendary rock band from California, The Doors. The Doors were, in their original form, Jim Morrison on lead vocals, and he was their primary lyricist, Robbie Krieger on guitar, Ray Manzarek on keyboards, John Densmore on drums. From 1967 through 1971, on the 6 albums with the original lineup, the Doors were regularly putting out hit singles, had top selling albums, in an era in which we had so much creativity in the rock genre. The Doors really stood out. Nobody really sounded like the Doors, in my opinion. And I think that's the reason that their music is endured so much to this day. Of course, Jim Morrison's bigger than life personality also did as well, to the point where in the 80s, you heard the Doors as much as you did in the 60s. And then you had Oliver Stone's film, The Doors, in 1991. I think that introduced a lot of new fans to their music as well. So let's get started with my ranking of the Doors albums. I guess the question, if you're a real big fan or even a casual fan, is which of the 2 albums would you rank without Jim Morrison at the bottom? And for me, it would be Other Voices from 1971. Now, from here, you had Ray Manzarek and Robbie Krieger on the lead vocals. They were trading off sometimes. They'd sing together, and they weren't the same without Jim. Let's be clear about that right now. And it's not just because neither one of them had a strong lead singing voice. I just don't think the songs are here either. The songs were so much more superior on the first 6 albums with Jim. But there are some good songs on here that I quite like. And I do like that they were really going into more of a jazz direction on this album. And the next album we'll talk about, Ships with Sails, I think is very strong. That jam in there is excellent. Tightrope Ride is very, very good. And those were the 2 singles that were on the album. Tightrope Ride is more into that hard blues vein that you had on Morrison Hotel and that you'd have on LA Woman. Hang On to Your Life, I think, is a very strong closer, and it gets very Santana-esque in the last couple minutes of the song, which is very, very cool. Rest of the songs, I mean, they just don't stand out. In the Eye of the Sun, Varieties of Spice of Life, Down the Farm. I'm Horny, I'm Stoned reminds you a little bit of Ship of Fools in its rollicking feel, but it's nowhere near as good a song. Yeah, Wandering Musician, that doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, it's musically, it's a strong album, but I just don't think the songs are here. So my number 9 would be Other Voices from 1971, and my number 8 would be Full Circle from 1972. Now, this is a much more cohesive album, in my opinion. And when I listen to this album, I think to myself, this could have really led to something. I would have loved if they continued to go on, but the record sales were nowhere near as strong without Jim than with Jim. This album only hit number 68 in the States. Other Voices without Jim hit number 31. I think that a lot of that was on name recognition. But the material here is noticeably stronger than what you have on Other Voices. The single off this album was The Mosquito. The Mosquito would actually hit number 85 on the US charts. Number 80, I'm sorry, it didn't hit number 84 on the UK charts. That would be the opening track, Get Up and Dance. The Mosquito, for my money, the first minute and 10 seconds of the song are not good at all. And then when it goes into that jam, it just goes to another level. And it is a excellent track. I'm not going to say it's on the level of the best songs from the first 6 albums. No, I wouldn't say that. But the jamming on here, the musicianship is wonderful. This is a killer jam. A lot of other strong tracks on here as well. First thing that jumps out at you when you listen to this album is you have the female backing vocals, which are a little jarring when you know what the Doors had done before. But I think it adds to this album because Ray and Robbie were not strong lead vocals, although they did a better job on here than they did on other voices. Vertilac is very, very cool. You got a great sax solo on here. Again, I really loved the direction they were going into musically. Hardwood Floor is more of a hard blues that they were doing a little bit on other voices in the last two albums of Morrison. The Piano Bird, I think, is very, very cool. The Peking King and the New York Queen, I like quite a bit. 4 Billion Souls. So there's a lot of stuff to offer on here. And I think this is an album that's going to grow in my estimation the more I get into this album. So my number 8 is Full Circle from 1972. My number 7 is an album they released in 1978 called An American Prayer under Jim Morrison's name, music by The Doors. I don't own an original copy of the CD, but I did buy the cassette back in the day. In 1991, I was big into The Doors, but the movie really did it for me. And I bought all the cassettes. I went later and bought all the CDs. This was released in 78. And when you listen to this album, you can tell it was released in 78 because you got the funk bass on there. You have more of a typical of late 70s production, really clean. Think of the albums that were coming out by Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles and Jackson Browne at that point. And it has that similar production, but I think that production really works on here. I think that Robbie has become a better guitar player at this point as well. The Ghost Song would hit number 54 on the Billboard Hot 100. And a lot of these songs, it's interesting because you have a lot of just spoken word tracks from Jim on here. You have his poetry being put to now original music for 1978 by the remaining members of the Doors. And you also have other tracks when you have songs from previous albums, such as Peace Frog, Blue Sunday, Riders on the Storm, added as the backing music to Jim's wordplay, his poetry here. And I think cohesively it works very well. You also have a killer live version of Roadhouse Blues originally on Morrison Hotel. Other tracks on here that I really, really enjoy: Black Polished Chrome, Latino Chrome, Angels and Sailors, the movie. The movie is pretty short, but if you've seen the Doors movie with Oliver Stone, you will recognize this immediately. You will also recognize A Feast of Friends, which ends the Doors movie in proper. And there's other strong tracks on here, like American Prayer is very, very good, the title track. Laments, you listen to it now, it's kind of comical. Other songs on here: Stone Immaculate, Curses, Invocations, American Night. American Night's pretty short, but I think this works well. I mean, you're not going to say this is a classic album, but in relation to Jim's poetry, the original music behind it, I think works well within the album. And my number 7 is An American Prayer by Jim Morrison with music by the Doors. This was released in 1978. Now, we're going to go into the first 6 classic albums by the Doors. And my controversial, perhaps contrarian, number 6 pick is their last album, LA Woman. You're probably wondering why. Well, I'll tell you. I'm not high on the blues songs. If you talked to me when I was 20, I would have told you this was a 10 album. Now at 54, I recognize the highs. The highs are amazing on here. I Can never get sick of the title song. I think that's one of the great songs for driving in your car and going on the open road. Love Her Madly, a number 12 hit in the United States. Wonderful. Excellent. Very memorable track. L'America has that great tribal feel, which is really cool. The Changeling is a wonderful opener. Riders on the Storm, the last song on the album. This would be I think at number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100 1971. Has a different kind of feel. This is something that Paul Rothchild, their original producer, would call cocktail music, but it's just a very elegant track. It's very, very mellow by the Doors standards, but it is a classic rock staple to this day. Now, why would I rank this number 6? I don't like Crawling King Snake. I'm not high on Cars Hissed by My Window. Jim sounds tired. And I don't think what the band brought to these blues songs is they sound tired. But the bluesier songs that came before and after have more fire to them. Hyacinth House, I do like a lot. That's very whimsical. It's got a really cool feeling to it. The Wasp, Texas Radio, and the Big Beat, you heard that on classic rock radio a lot back in the day. That one I like. I'm not big on Crawling King Snake, though. Cars Hissed by My Window, Bend Down So Long. Nah. Just, I think this is below their standards, but almost everything else is a banger. So, a number 6 is LA Woman from 1971. My number 5 is the band's 4th album, and this was released in 1969, The Soft Parade. Now, at one point, like LA Woman, I would have ranked this higher. Thing about this album is there's a lot of horns on here, a lot of orchestral arrangements. The big hit was Touch Me. Touch Me, you still hear all the time. Touch Me was released several months before the album came out. They had a hard time releasing this album. They spent several months in the studio. I think a lot of it had to do with Jim Morrison because his drinking was really starting to get out of control at this point. Now, Touch Me is an all-out classic. And the orchestral arrangements I talk about, I believe they're only on like 4 songs on here, including the opener, Tell All the People, which is a cool opener. It's got a nice elegance to it, but it sounds like Jim Morrison solo with the orchestra on there. That was a single. That single, along with these songs, Running Blue and Wishful Sinful, would not hit the top 40. This album had 4 singles on it, but only one was successful, and that came out several months before in Touch Me. The other tracks, as I go through them, Shaman's Blues, I think, is excellent. I love the vibe on here. I love Jim's lyrics and delivery on this. This kicks. Do It. I'm not high on that song. One thing about this album, I think, compared to the first 3, this is when you start to hear a little filler. Do It, I'm not high on. I'm not high on Wild Child. Wild Child kind of sounds a little too repetitive for me, although I do love Robbie's guitar work on here. Running Blue is okay. I mean, that was a single, and I do like the bridge on there. Some of the sax playing is very cool. I love Wishful Sinful. It is wonderful. Easy Ride. Now, I know I'm kind of going all over the track listing here. Easy Ride, a lot of people would consider that to be filler. I think it just sounds like a messed up carnival, and I think it's really, really cool. I love Jim's spirit on here. I mean, it sounds like something you'd hear on a carousel, but it's just really, really cool. And I love the title song. I love that intro. Well, I was back there in seminary school. And then it kind of starts out like a lullaby and it kind of gets a little funky and then it gets very tribal. It goes through all these different movements and it's really, really cool. To my ears, it's the second of their three great epics. I think it's a wonderful closer and I like most of this album quite a bit. Number 5 is Soft Parade from 1969. My number 4 is their second album from 1967, and that is Strange Days. Now, a lot of people, when this came out, said, oh, no, it's just the same album as the debut. It just has lesser songs. And I'm not going to say it's as strong as the debut, in my opinion, but there's still a lot to love on here. And this is an album that has really grown in my estimation. I used to have this at the bottom of the classic 6 Doors albums. And now I have it at number 4. The singles here, Where People Are Strange was the first single. That hit number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100, just so close to the top 10. But it is a very enduring and endearing single, very short for that. At that time, you had a lot of songs that were singles where it were 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes. Very, very cool. I think Love Me Two Times, the second single, which hit number 25 on the Billboard charts, has actually endured a little bit better with that guitar line in there. Very memorable musically, wonderful performance from Jim, particularly on that last chorus. Very, very cool. Strange Days, the song that opens the album, the title track, is very, very cool, and it just brings you right in. And it's got this very eerie yet catchy feel to it. Your Lost Little Girl, very, very sensual. Love that track. Unhappy Girl, more of a pop delivery on this, but it's very, very memorable and it really takes you in. Moonlight Drive was one of the first songs that I believe Jim brought to the Doors. Very, very cool. That slinky guitar line is very memorable on that. My Eyes Have Seen You has more of that slinky guitar, but it's a more raging track. It's more hard hitting. I Can't See Your Face in My Mind. Now there we're going more towards psychedelia, and that's a really cool song as well. And When the Music's Over is their second recorded great epic. I'm not as high on that as the Soft Parade or the End, but I think it's a very cool closer. I just don't think it has that same gravitas. But this is a wonderful album. 1967, we had so much great music, and the Doors blessed us with 2 very strong albums. My number 4 is Strange Days from 1967. My number 3 is the band's third album, released in 1968, and that is Waiting for the Sun. Now, Waiting for the Sun, the opening track on here, Hello, I Love You, I believe, well, first of all, this was their only number 1 album in the United States. Hard to believe when you consider the self-titled debut is the biggest selling album. That actually only hit number 2. This one hit number 1. Hello, I Love You would be their second number 1 single. It's a song that's very memorable and catchy and very reminiscent of the Kinks' You Really Got Me, You're All Day and All the Night. It has that same kind of feel, but it's a little slower, not as grinding, but, very catchy. The other single on this album was The Unknown Soldier, at a time when we had some really far out singles. The Unknown Soldier hit number 39 on the Billboard Hot 100. When you listen to this song in retrospect, it's surprising that it hit that high. It is a excellent song. It just doesn't play like a single. And the very autobiographical song in it with the march drums and the gunshots. and Jim's delivery, which was very solemn and then became very raging, and Ray Manzarek's keyboards shine throughout the song. Very, very cool track by the Doors. One of my favorites. Love Street, very elegant track. Excellent. Not to Touch the Earth. Now, this was part of the epic celebration of the lizard, which they wanted to put on this album, but they were shot down by their record company. I believe it was Elektra. So we only got one part of the celebration of the lizard, and that's Not to Touch the Earth. You want to hear the full celebration of the lizard, you can hear that on the Doors in Concerts that was released in 1991, which combined the Absolutely Live, Live at the Hollywood Bowl, and Live She Cried albums. I believe it was on Absolutely Live originally, but in its original form that would come out on that live album, it's like 19 minutes. It is amazing. But Not to Touch the Earth is killer, and it's just very haunting and very dramatic. It is awesome. Then we get two songs in a row which would have played like great singles back in 1968. Summer's Almost Gone, which is slower and more dour, and Wintertime Love, which is more poppy and shiny and bright. Very, very cool. Spanish Caravan. Now we got Robbie playing that wonderful flamenco guitar before the keyboards kick in. And this is another very memorable song. Very different, even for 1968. Very cool. My Wild Love. Very, very tribal. We Could Be So Good Together. Another cool tune. Yes, the River Knows is wonderful. Very, very elegant. What a wonderful vocal from Jim on that. And 5-1, little more tribal again, just like My Wild Love, but it's got more guitar in it. It just brings you in a lot more than My Wild Love would do. My Wild Love feels a little more repetitive. 5-1 just kicks, and it just really points the trigger to them, points the direction of where they would go with their more blues leanings on the next few albums. So my number 3 is Waiting for the Sun from 1968. My number 2 is, and there's very little that separates my 2 and 1, but my number 2 has always been the self-titled debut. Now, you cannot deny the highs on this album. Break On Through was not a big hit, but is one of their most enduring songs. Welcome to the World, the Doors. It has that kind of feel. It would just bring you in. You can argue it's one of their 5 best singles. I don't even know if it hit the top 100. As far as other singles, Light My Fire would hit number 1 in a much shorter version on AM radio. It took out that whole jam in it. This is the Doors at their best. The playing on it is wonderful. What a jam. What a wonderful lyrical guitar solo from Robbie Krieger on here. Excellent. One thing about this trio behind Jim Morrison, these guys were fantastic musically. John Densmore, I mean, for drama, you can't go much better than John Densmore as a drummer, which is on full display on a track like this or the closing track, The End. The End is near 12 minutes long, an epic 40 ages. It is cinema at its finest. I don't think too many bands try to do a song like this again. I mean, this was just for 1967, a time when we had so much creativity. This really stood out. Those are like the 3 songs you hear the most on this album. Although the end, you might hear at 2 in the morning because it's so long. Soul Kitchen, very memorable. great rocker there. The Crystal Ship is more elegant. I say elegant a lot with the Doors because they did elegance like few others did. Beautiful song, beautiful arrangement on here. 20th Century Fox is a killer, is another killer rockin' track. Alabama song, Whiskey Bar in parentheses because they say Whiskey Bar in that song more than Alabama. They never say Alabama song. But this is very memorable. Cool chorus on here. Backdoor Man, that's the old Willie Dixon standard. They make this their own. This is something that would become a live staple. And then from here, you got three great deep cuts. I Looked at You. It's more of a pop feel, but it's a very cool track. End of the Night. Now we're more eerie, more spooky. Very cool. Take It As It Comes. Very hard hitting. All these songs are pretty under 3 minutes long. They could have played out as singles. I think a song like I Looked at You could have. Very, very cool. Everything on here works. This is a 10 out of 10 album. I think 1967 had a lot of those kind of albums. My number 2 is the band's self-titled debut from 1967. And my number 1, and it's been my number 1 since 1991, and it is Morrison Hotel, originally called Morrison Hotel Hard Rock Cafe, was released in 1970. Now, when you listen to this album, and if you listen to these albums chronologically, as much as I like Soft Parade, you had some filler coming in. The performances weren't quite as strong or as riveting. Here, they get their mojo back. This, to me, is their most cohesive album. Here, they're rocking hard again. And we didn't have a hit single on here. This is the only album by the Doors that did not have a top 40 hit single in the United States. I believe You Make Me Real was the single, and it missed the top 40, but Roadhouse Blues was the B-side. And Roadhouse Blues was the one that got played, and Roadhouse Blues is a song you still hear to this day. And you rarely hear You Make Me Real, even though that is just a wonderful rock song with a great guitar line and great drum beat in there from John. And it's got a lot of fire and a lot of passion. Waiting for the Sun was released on this album, not the third album with that title. This has it's very memorable with its dun 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 dun. That rhythm, it really brings you in. Cool bridge on it. Peace Frog Blue Sunday. Used to hear these two songs together as a twofer on classic rock radio because Peace Frog was more rollicking and upbeat, and Blue Sunday was mellower and really focused on Jim's voice. It worked perfect as a twofer. One of the great twofers that you don't hear together much anymore. Ship of Fools, fantastic. Love this song. Another great bridge on it. I think the band are on fire on this track, as well as the next one, Land Ho. The keyboards on here from Ray are magical. The performance is wonderful. Love Jim's vocal on here, especially at the end when he goes, "If I get my hands on a dollar bill." That is excellent. The Spy slows it down to a cool blues, but unlike the blues tracks on LA Woman, I think this works very, very well. I love the sense of space and restraint that the band have on this track. Queen of the Highway, we go more jazz, and this is beautiful. To me, one of the great deep cuts by the Doors. I think it could have been a hit single if they released this as a hit, as a single rather. Really cool. Indian Summer, similar to Blue Sunday. It's a lot more mellow, more focus on Jim's voice. Very memorable. Maggie McGill is this hard blues that just tears at you, and it is really, really cool. Yeah, maybe a little repetitive, but Jim's vocal, that snarling guitar from Robbie. Very, very hard hitting. And it's a wonderful closer on fantastic album from 1970. My number one Doors album is Morrison Hotel. Now, to do a recap of my 9 solo albums, how I would rank them. My number 9 is Other Voices from 1971. My number 8 is Full Circle from 1972. My number 7 is An American Prayer, posthumous album from 1978. My number 6 is LA Woman from 1971. My number 5 is Soft Parade from 1969. My number 4 is Strange Days from 1967. My number 3 is Waiting for the Sun from 1968. My number 2 is The Doors' self-titled debut from 1967. And my number 1 is Morrison Hotel from 1970. So, what do you think of the Doors music? Have you seen the Doors movie? Were you alive and experiencing these songs in real time? What are your favorite Doors songs? How would you rank these albums? And if you don't have the albums or haven't heard the albums without Jim on lead vocals, how would you rank those original 6 and American Prayer as well? Please let me know in the comments what you think of the Doors. Thank you so much for watching the show. Plenty more to come. Do what you love, and I'll talk to you soon.